So today we're gonna do a deep dive into something that's pretty crucial in addiction treatment, and that's compassionate care.
Okay.
And we're looking at this article called "The Role of Compassionate Care in Addiction Treatment: How Empathy Improves Patient Outcomes."
Right.
It's by Kate Schultz, and it was published just last month.
Okay.
And it really digs into why this approach seems to work so well.
Yeah, you know what I find really fascinating about this is that we're moving past just the kind of like, be nice, it's good for patients.
Right.
You know, this article highlights how empathy, which is really the core of compassionate care, actually impacts brain function in ways that support recovery.
So instead of just telling people to be kind,
Mm-hmm.
we're actually starting to understand the biological mechanisms behind why it's so effective.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm all ears.
So think about the stigma that a lot of people with addiction face.
Right.
They're often seen as lacking willpower or being morally flawed.
Yeah.
This article emphasizes seeing addiction as a disease and how that shift impacts treatment.
Yeah, it makes sense that if someone feels judged, they're less likely to open up and engage in the treatment.
Right.
But how does compassionate care actually change things on a neurological level?
Well, the article points to some pretty interesting studies on oxytocin.
Okay.
It's a hormone linked to social bonding and stress reduction.
Mm-hmm.
When we experience empathy, our brains release oxytocin, which could explain why compassionate care helps build trust between patients and providers.
So it's not just about feeling good, it's about creating a hormonal environment that's actually more conducive to healing.
Right. And on the flip side, you have cortisol, the stress hormone.
Right.
High cortisol levels are linked to cravings and relapse.
Mm-hmm.
So compassionate care, by reducing stress, may help regulate those cortisol levels, making it easier to break free from addiction.
So we're talking about creating a positive feedback loop.
Exactly.
Empathy leads to oxytocin, which reduces stress,
Yeah.
which in turn lowers cortisol, making relapse less likely. Okay, so how does this actually play out in a real treatment setting?
Well, the article goes into this idea of the therapeutic alliance, that bond between the patient and provider.
Okay.
It's not just about being friendly.
Right.
A strong alliance is directly linked to better outcomes, according to research.
It's like if you feel truly seen and understood by your therapist,
Yeah.
you're more likely to trust their guidance and stick with the treatment plan.
Exactly. The article actually cites a study where patients who felt their therapists were compassionate were more likely to stay in treatment longer,
Okay.
leading to better long-term outcomes.
So that's a concrete example of how compassion translates into real results.
Yeah.
It's not just a feel-good approach.
Okay.
It's actually making a difference in people's lives.
And it goes even deeper.
Okay.
The article talks about how compassionate care can help activate the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain involved in decision-making and self-control.
Right.
Think about it. If you're constantly stressed, it's harder to make rational choices, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So by creating a safe and supportive environment, compassionate care actually allows the brain to function better,
Okay.
making it easier for someone to resist cravings and make healthy decisions.
So by creating a safe and supportive environment, compassionate care actually allows the brain to function better,
Yeah.
making it easier for someone to resist cravings and make healthy decisions.
Exactly. And this is especially important for people with co-occurring mental health conditions, which is incredibly common
Right.
in those struggling with addiction. Compassionate care provides that sense of validation and safety they need to address both their mental health and their addiction.
Okay. This is all starting to paint a really compelling picture.
Yeah.
But beyond simply describing the benefits, does the article offer any guidance on how to actually put compassionate care into practice?
It does, and that's where it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
It emphasizes the need for training providers in empathy and emotional intelligence.
Right.
It's not enough to tell someone to be more compassionate.
Right.
They need the skills to actually do it effectively.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine that requires a pretty huge shift in how we think about healthcare training.
Absolutely. It's about moving away from purely clinical, symptom-focused approaches and embracing a more holistic view of the patient.
So it's not just about treating the addiction, it's about treating the whole person.
Precisely.
Excellent.
And that includes recognizing the impact of trauma,
Right.
social isolation, and other factors that contribute to addiction.
It sounds like a big task changing the entire system like that.
It is.
Are there any real-world examples of this actually happening?
There are. and the results are promising.
Okay.
One example the article highlights is the Housing First initiative, which has gained traction in addressing homelessness.
Okay.
It's based on the idea that stable housing is a fundamental human need and shouldn't be contingent on meeting certain conditions like sobriety or employment.
So instead of saying, get sober, then we'll give you a place to live,
Right.
Housing First says, here's a place to live, and we'll support you on your journey to recovery. That's a pretty radical shift in perspective.
It is. And what's remarkable is that it's actually more effective in reducing chronic homelessness and improving overall well-being.
So it's a win-win.
Right.
You're treating people with compassion and you're getting better results.
Exactly. And this approach isn't limited to homelessness.
Okay.
The article also discusses the growing movement towards trauma-informed care in various settings, from schools to prisons to healthcare facilities.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing the impact of trauma and creating environments that promote healing rather than re-traumatization.
So it sounds like these initiatives are starting to challenge the traditional, often punitive approaches to social problems.
Yeah,
And replacing them with something more humane and ultimately more effective.
that's exactly right. And it's all rooted in the same principle.
Okay.
Recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of every human being and approaching them with compassion and understanding.
That's powerful stuff. So it seems like compassionate care isn't just about individual interactions between patients and providers. It's about creating a more compassionate society as a whole.
Absolutely. And that's something worth striving for, don't you think?
I completely agree. It's not just about being nice. It's about creating a world where everyone feels seen, heard, and supported.
Well said. But before we get carried away with our visions of a utopian future,
Okay.
let's take a step back and explore some of the practical challenges of implementing compassionate care on a wider scale.
All right.
We'll get into that after a short break.
Stay tuned. So we were talking about how compassionate care is leading to some pretty big changes in how we address social issues. But let's be real, shifting from tough love to genuine compassion can't be easy, especially in fields like addiction treatment, where resources are already stretched so thin.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think one of the biggest hurdles is we can't just tell people to be more empathetic.
Right.
Providers need training,
Yeah.
like active listening skills, understanding the impact of trauma being culturally sensitive. You know, it's a whole new skill set.
And that takes time and money. Something a lot of healthcare systems are short on.
Exactly.
Which make me wonder, is compassionate care really sustainable on a large scale?
It's a valid concern, and this article actually touches on that.
Okay.
It mentions a study that found burnout among healthcare professionals is a major barrier.
Oh, wow.
If staff are overwhelmed and stressed, it's harder for them to provide compassionate care no matter how well-intentioned they are.
That's kind of a catch-22, isn't it?
Yeah.
We need compassionate care to address burnout, but burnout makes it harder to provide compassionate care.
Exactly. It highlights the need for systemic change. We can't just focus on training individuals.
Right.
We need to create supportive work environments, prioritize staff well-being, and ensure that adequate resources are available.
So it's about changing the entire culture of healthcare, not just expecting individuals to shoulder the burden of compassion.
Precisely, the article actually uses this term compassion fatigue,
Okay.
which describes the emotional exhaustion that can come from caring for others, especially in these high-stress environments.
That makes perfect sense. If we're asking healthcare providers to bring empathy and emotional intelligence to their work every day, we need to make sure they're getting the support they need to avoid burning out.
Right, and it's not just about protecting staff. Compassion fatigue can actually negatively impact patient care.
How so?
Well, if a provider is emotionally depleted, they're less likely to be attentive, responsive, and truly present for their patients.
So it's a lose-lose situation. Burnout leads to less compassionate care, which then perpetuates the cycle of burnout.
Unfortunately, yes. But the good news is there are organizations out there that are actively addressing this issue.
Okay.
They're implementing mindfulness programs for staff, offering peer support groups, and advocating for policies that promote work-life balance and reduce those administrative burdens.
So it sounds like these organizations are recognizing that investing in staff well-being is essential for providing compassionate care.
Exactly. And it's not just about altruism. Studies have shown that when healthcare professionals feel supported and valued, they're more engaged in their work, more likely to stay in their jobs and provide higher quality care.
So it's a smart investment,
Mm-hmm.
both ethically and practically.
Absolutely. And the benefits extend beyond individual organizations.
Right.
When healthcare systems prioritize compassion and well-being, it creates a ripple effect throughout the entire community.
It's like creating a culture of compassion that extends from that individual provider all the way out to the larger society.
Exactly. And that's what makes me optimistic about the future of addiction treatment and healthcare in general.
It's inspiring to see how the science of empathy and compassion is starting to inform real-world practices.
And it's not just limited to healthcare. We're seeing this shift towards compassionate approaches in education,
Now,
criminal justice, and even business.
it's like we're finally starting to understand that treating people with dignity, respect, and understanding isn't just the right thing to do, it's also the smart thing to do.
Exactly. And it's not just about those warm and fuzzy feelings. There's a growing body of evidence demonstrating the tangible benefits of compassion, from improved health outcomes to increased productivity to stronger communities.
It sounds like we're on the cusp of a major paradigm shift, moving away from punishment and control and embracing empathy and understanding.
I believe we are, and it's a shift that's long overdue.
I couldn't agree more. But before we get too carried away with our utopian visions, let's bring it back down to earth for a moment and talk about some specific examples of compassionate care in action.
Okay.
We touched on the Housing First initiative earlier, but I'm curious to hear about other programs that are making a difference.
Yeah, I'm happy to share some inspiring examples. One that comes to mind is a program that's gaining traction in the criminal justice system called restorative justice.
Okay.
It's an approach that focuses on repairing the harm caused by crime rather than simply punishing the offender.
That sounds interesting. How does that work in practice?
So instead of just sending someone to prison, restorative justice brings together the victim, the offender, and sometimes members of the community to have this facilitated dialogue.
Okay.
The goal is to allow the victim to express their needs and feelings, give the offender an opportunity to take responsibility for their actions, and come up with a plan for making amends.
So it's about accountability and healing, not just punishment.
Exactly. And studies have shown that restorative justice can be incredibly effective. Victims report feeling more satisfied with the outcome, offenders are less likely to reoffend, and communities benefit from reduced crime rates.
It's like a win-win-win situation.
hmm
Everyone involved benefits from this more compassionate approach.
And it's a great example of how we can apply the principles of compassionate care beyond traditional healthcare settings.
It makes you wonder how many other social problems could be addressed more effectively if we approach them through this lens of compassion.
Absolutely. Another inspiring example is this growing movement towards trauma-informed schools. These schools recognize the impact of trauma on children's learning and behavior and create environments that promote safety, connection, and emotional regulation.
So instead of just punishing kids for acting out, they try to understand the root causes of their behavior and provide them with the support they need to heal and thrive.
Exactly. And the results are remarkable. Schools that have implemented trauma-informed practices report significant reductions in suspensions, expulsions, and bullying, as well as improvements in academic performance and overall well-being.
It's like we're finally starting to recognize that children's behavior is often a reflection of their experiences, and that meeting their emotional needs is essential for their success, both in school and in life.
And it's not just about helping kids who've experienced trauma. Trauma-informed approaches benefit all students by creating a more positive and supportive learning environment.
It's like creating a culture of compassion that permeates that entire school community.
Exactly. And this shift towards compassion isn't limited to specific programs or initiatives. We're seeing a growing awareness of the importance of empathy and kindness in all areas of life.
Yeah, from the rise of mindfulness practices to the increase in focus on social justice and environmental sustainability, it seems like there's a collective awakening happening, a recognition that we're all interconnected and that our actions have a ripple effect on the world around us.
And this interconnectedness isn't just a spiritual concept, it's backed up by science. Neuroscience has shown us that our brains are wired for empathy and compassion, and that these qualities are essential for our individual and collective well-being.
So it's like we're evolving as a species, becoming more aware of our shared humanity and the importance of caring for one another.
I'm hopeful that this growing awareness will lead to a more just equitable and compassionate world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
That's a beautiful vision.
Yeah.
But how do we get from where we are now to that more compassionate future? What are the next steps in this evolution?
That's a great question, and I think the answer lies in a combination of individual and collective action. On an individual level, we can all make a conscious effort to cultivate more compassion in our own lives.
Okay.
This means practicing empathy, kindness, and understanding in our interactions with others.
And it also means being kind to ourselves, recognizing our own struggles and imperfections with compassion and acceptance.
Absolutely. Self-compassion is the foundation of compassion for others. If we can't extend kindness and understand it to ourselves, it's much harder to do so for others.
So it starts with inner work, cultivating a compassionate heart and mind,
Yeah.
but then it needs to translate into outward action, making choices that contribute to a more compassionate world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This can involve things like volunteering our time, donating to causes we care about, speaking out against injustice, and simply making an effort to be more mindful and kind in our everyday interactions.
It sounds like a lot of work,
It is.
but it also feels incredibly hopeful.
It is hopeful because the truth is compassion is contagious when we act with kindness, and understanding it inspires others to do the same. And those small acts of compassion multiplied over time have the power to create a ripple effect that can transform our world.
I love that image of a ripple effect. It reminds us that even small acts of kindness can have a profound impact. But it also underscores the importance of collective action. If we want to create lasting change, we need to work together.
Absolutely. We need to advocate for policies that promote compassion and justice. We need to support organizations that are doing amazing work in this area, and we need to have conversations like this one, raising awareness and inspiring others to join the movement.
It sounds like a challenging but incredibly rewarding journey.
It is, but I believe it's the most important journey we can take as human beings.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up this deep dive into compassionate care. But before we go, I just want to say that it's been really inspiring to explore this topic with you, and I hope our listeners are leaving with a renewed sense of hope and a commitment to bringing more compassion into their own lives and into the world around them.
Me too. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us, and until next time, stay curious. We're back and ready for those inspiring examples you mentioned. It just feels like we're at this turning point where people are realizing that compassion isn't just this nice idea. It can actually lead to real solutions.
Absolutely. And what's so exciting is that it's popping up in these kind of unexpected places.
Yeah.
Like take the criminal justice system, for example. The article briefly touches on restorative justice.
Right.
Have you heard of that?
I have, but I'll admit I don't know that much about how it actually works. It sounds almost too idealistic, like focusing on repairing harm instead of just punishment. Is that really possible?
It is, and it's actually gaining traction.
Shocking.
So imagine instead of just sending someone to prison,
Right.
you bring together the victim, the offender, and sometimes even members of the community to have this facilitated dialogue.
So it's about facing the consequences of your actions, but also having a chance to make things right.
Right.
That must be incredibly powerful for the victim knowing they're being heard and that their pain is acknowledged.
Exactly. And for the offender, it's a chance to understand the impact of their actions and take responsibility for what they've done.
Right.
And the goal is to create a plan for making amends, which might involve community service or restitution or even just a sincere apology.
It sounds like a much more holistic approach than just locking someone up and hoping for the best. But does it actually work?
Well, there's a growing body of evidence that suggests it does. Studies have shown that restorative justice can lead to higher victim satisfaction rates, lower recidivism rates, and even reduced crime rates overall.
Wow.
It's not a quick fix, but it seems to be a more effective and humane approach in the long run.
It's amazing how this one concept, compassionate care, can be applied to such a wide range of issues, from addiction treatment to homelessness to criminal justice.
Right.
It's like we're finally starting to realize that punishment and isolation aren't the only solutions.
Mm-hmm.
There's another way.
And it's not just about changing systems, We
Yeah.
also need to look at how we can cultivate more compassion in our everyday lives.
Yeah.
Like, think about our interactions with others, even small things like being patient with a frustrated cashier or offering a listening ear to a friend who's going through a tough time. Those little acts of kindness can have a ripple effect.
It's like we're building a more compassionate world, one interaction at a time.
Exactly. And it's not just about being nice. It's about recognizing our shared humanity and understanding that everyone is fighting their own battles. We never know what someone else is going through. So a little bit of compassion can go a long way.
It sounds like we have a lot of work to do, both individually and collectively,
Yeah.
but it also feels incredibly hopeful to know that there are so many people and organizations out there that are dedicated to creating a more compassionate world.
It's definitely a journey, not a destination.
Right.
But I believe it's the most important journey we can take as human beings.
Well said. And to our listener, we hope this deep dive has sparked some curiosity and maybe even inspired you to bring a little more compassion into your own corner of the world.
Remember, even the smallest acts of kindness can make a difference.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of compassionate care. Till next time.
If you or a loved one are struggling with substance use, we can help. Call Longbranch Recovery at 504-474-7927 or visit longbranchrecovery.com to learn more about our specialized addiction treatment programs. Start your path to recovery at Longbranch.